Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here to share this topic with you, to discuss this topic with you. I think, firstly, congratulations to South African Citizen Network for the 20 years. It's a great milestone. So I always tend to quantify things with things that we know. So what that means is that a child was born when SACN was set up. That child is a direct and active economic participant in the economy in the 20 years of existence of SACN. So well done and congratulations on this. This is a very broad topic. I'm going to just touch on a few aspects that will tend to stimulate your thinking as the custodians of economic development of the country. I'm saying that specifically because if you look at the GDP of the country, the cities drive most of it. So it's in your hands. And I will share statistics with you that also show that SMEs contribute a very big percentage of that GDP. So there is literally nothing small about small, micro, medium enterprises. Just to anchor this discussion, I'll open up for hands in the last 10 minutes so that we can do a bit of discussion. But let me start by defining. I'll pull a definition from the Small Business Development Ministry that says SMEs, any type of business from small, medium, and micro with thresholds in total annual turnover, total full-time equivalent paid employees, and that is also dependent on the sector specific. So when you talk about the total annual turnover, it depends on the sector. Maybe you are in construction sector or you are in the services sector. So it depends on that. This is the definition as provided by the Department of Small Business Ministry. That was actually passed in 2019. This is the latest definition. And SMEs play a very huge role in our economy, in our cities. And what is interesting, if you do an academic study on the impact of SMEs, it's not a South African issue, it's not an African issue, but it's a global issue. It was very interesting that during the global recession as a result of COVID in 2020, that countries that have a higher participation of SMEs in their economy, their recession was less than those that have less participation of SMEs. Very interesting statistics. Because what SMEs do, they create new businesses. Very low barrier of entry to start an SME. Yes, there are barriers of entry depending on certain sectors, but it's easy to start an SME. In the informal sector, it's even much easier. So they create new businesses. And talking about new businesses, it's very interesting. If you look in the country, you look even globally, big businesses have been shrinking. They have been shedding jobs due to the advent and the adoption of 4IR digital innovation becoming big. Big businesses are shrinking. If there are people here from the Nelson Mandela Bay in Gqeberha, if they were to give you the statistics in terms of how many people were employed in the motor vehicle plants in 2002 when SACN was born, and how many people are employed today, it's shocking statistics. in terms of the actual number of people that are employed in that sector. Because technology is displacing some jobs. So SMEs are able to create new businesses. SMEs are able to create jobs. So it's two things to unemployed people. Either you start your own business or you look for a job. And let me share with you, I won't mention the company. One of the companies that approached us, Tshimologong is owned by Wits University, so we are a digital innovation precinct by Wits. There's one of the biggest companies in South Africa. I won't mention the industry because you will identify them. They've actually approached us. Before COVID, they had more than 500 students on bursaries in all the universities, most of them being at Wits and at UCT. And reality is, to get that bursary, you needed to be top of your class in matric, and top of your class in first year, top of your class in second year. They had more than 500 students at any given point in time. Now they have around 200 students on bursaries. And reality is, the economy is not creating the much needed jobs. So you've got these top graduates that were funded, whose higher education was funded by this company. When they graduate, guess what? They join the unemployed. Because the economy is not creating jobs. So when they approached us, they asked us to design a program that you will, while they are doing their courses in university, to say, let's create a program that will stimulate entrepreneurial skills, that those who will be bitten by the entrepreneurial bug will actually move into that sector. Because the economy is not creating the jobs. So SMEs, therefore, are able to create the much needed jobs. I'm not going to give you the statistics for jobs because we all know it's actually creating a social problem. Unemployment is creating a massive social problem. Just, is it yesterday, where we had people in Cape Town that were demonstrating in Parliament. And it was organizations from Guguletu, from Nyanga. They went to Parliament to say, whatever you're discussing in there, can you consider us? Because we're suffering. SMEs are able to provide people with products and services. And as I said, it's much easier to start an SME. The barriers to entry are there, but entrepreneurs are able to go around them. And we saw this during COVID, where some SMEs thrived because they were able to quickly adjust and adopt technologies to save the people. If you look at the companies that were thriving actually during COVID, most of them, they fell under SMMEs. And SMEs are able to stimulate and intensify competition. And competition is good because it is the consumer who benefits out of competition. That's the reason why we have the Competition Commission to look at anti-competitive behaviors, because it's the consumers that will suffer if there is no competition. Competition is good. And SMEs, because they're able to lower the barrier to entry, because sometimes they don't carry higher overheads. They're able to offer services and products at much affordable. So they introduce competition to the landscape. And SMEs are able to increase productivity. And all this that I've just mapped here, I'm saying SMEs, they create or they become a vehicle or an incubator for growth, with much needed growth, for economic development, the much needed economic development, for poverty alleviation and improving living conditions. And all this, I can sum up and say, SMEs are able to drive economic development in the country. Therefore, the cities, they have to be intentional in the programs that they do to support SMEs. You have to be intentional because you are supporting a vehicle that incubates new businesses, that incubates job creation, that incubates and provide people with resources and products, that incubates good competition, that incubates increased productivity. So SMEs, I actually plot this one to say, SMEs are able to generate more than half of all employment. Actually, sorry, not are able to. SMEs currently generate more than half of all employment activities. Half of all jobs are created by SMEs. 60% of total exports are created by SMEs. 50% of all workers in the manufacturing sector are employed from or by SMEs. These are just statistics. And 90% of all total export earnings, you can actually do the calculation, do the economy in terms of the GDP. 90% of all total export earnings are contributed by SMEs. So, just if I was to go back, looking at those statistics as cities, the broader economic strategy of the city should be slanted towards SMEs. Because this data is showing that if you want to grow the city's economy, you consider SMEs. They will create the much needed jobs. They will generate a lot of export earnings for the city that contributes to the GDP. And talking of the small, medium, micro enterprises, there is the formal and then there is the informal sector. If you look at the numbers, the green is the informal sector. And then the orange, let's call it the orange, is the formal sector. It's interesting. It has been consistent. If you look at, this is for the last 3 years. It's actually very interesting if you look at it. There's been a slight increase and a slight drop actually in the number of formal SMEs. But during COVID from 2020 to 2021, it's interesting that the number of formal SMEs actually increased. And then the informal, and if you look at in 2021, actually the number of SMEs increased in 2021. You can actually correlate that to the impact of COVID. While many people were losing jobs, retrenchments, loss of income, people had to sustain their lives. And how do they do that? Moving into the SME sector. And you can actually correlate this even to the economic growth during those years. 60% of all SMEs are informal. This is massive. 60% are in the informal sector. So when you look at that, that number already tells the municipality or the city that a huge chunk of the budget, support initiative, even on the strategy, when you draft the strategy, I know you call it the IDP. When you look at the IDP, you must be able to talk to the informal sector. Because most of the SMEs are informal. Do you have programs? Do you have initiatives that support, that enhance them? Because these are people that are able to actually employ themselves. Some of them actually move on and start employing other people. You say to create a social net. And one of the programs, again, that you look at, I've seen, I've engaged with some forums for informal sectors where they say even when the municipalities or when the cities wants to engage us, they want to call a meeting at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And what they don't understand is if I lose 3 hours of trading in a day, chances are that's my profit for the month. So it's now, cities now need to be aware of the dynamics around informal sector. That when you have programs, when you have meetings with them, you must know the direct impact of taking them out of their trading spaces. Why? Because most of them employ themselves. They don't have anyone else to stand in their space. This is massive. It's a massive number. 55% are actually micro enterprises. That's another massive number. I'm not going to give the definitions of what is small, micro, what is medium. You can find that in the document that was released by the Department of Small Business Ministry. 85% of them, this is what I'm going to focus on, 85% are in the cities. 85% of the SMMEs are found in the cities. That's a massive number. And I've worked for the city of Joburg some couple of years back, and I remember the statistics where we were talking about the in-migration to Gauteng. The city of Joburg taking a huge chunk of that. City of Tshwane as well, city of Egoruleni, taking a huge chunk of that. So these statistics, and remember, we're talking about 85% of these SMEs being in the cities, creating 50% of the jobs nationally. 2/3 of them do not have employees. They employ themselves. So, which is the owner? They employ themselves. That's why I said, when you have programs to support them, you need to be considerate that having a meeting with them, taking them out of their business, it's a loss of income. So something has to be done to actually compensate for that loss of income. Because, what do big businesses do? Big businesses, they take insurance. There is no startup that has actually thought about creating an insurance package for the informal sector. If there is some of you here who are entrepreneurial, I think you need to go look into that. It's because they don't have insurance. That's why when they fall sick, they lose an income. About 30% of them employ between 1 to 10 people. These are massive numbers. Current statistics, because the studies of SMEs, the numbers are not really fixed. You talk to someone, they'll tell you that there are around 6 million SMEs in the country. Some statistics will say it's around 2.6 to 3 million. The numbers that I used a very conservative number to say there are 2.6 million SMEs in the country. 30% of them employ between 1 and 10 people. So this one is not the owner, but it's an additional person, which is they already have 2 employees themselves and another person, and they stretch up to 10 employees. That's massive. So if let's say we're talking about 1,000, if 1,000 of them were to employ 3 people, looking at 3,000 people who will have jobs. And let's talk about the economy of SMEs. The economy of SMEs, they are coming from different industries. This is very interesting, with the exception, actually, of the trade and accommodation sector. It's a fair spread. Community services, construction, finance and business services, and even the other. It's a fair spread, 19, 13, 14, and 15. And then the one that employs the most, not employed, sorry, these are numbers, being 39%, which is quite interesting as well. Why do cities need these statistics? I'll repeat the same thing. You need to know the data, and this data is nationally. So you may need to do another research in your local city, local municipality, to say, what are the numbers? What is the focus area for the business? And one thing that I'll tell you about, especially the informal sector, which is something that incubators try and do, is to say, the over-concentration of certain sectors in business, which, yes, increases competition, but it also reduces the financial returns for that entity. I'll tell you, you can go to some townships where, I'm not even going to talk about streets, I'm talking about in the same streets, you'll have 5 of the same business, over-concentration. The GDP contribution of the SMEs. This is also very interesting. If you look at these numbers, on average, you can say SMMEs contribute 40% to the GDP. Please take note that these numbers do not include the informal sector, because there is no records of them. This is the formal sector. They contribute 40% of the GDP of the country. And you can track it from 2019, 2020, there was a slight drop, and then in 2021, there was a slight increase. And this is massive. And it's something that we need to consider when we plan and when we create even these economic zones. What do you call it? The special economic zones. We need to be considerate of saying, have we considered the SMEs? And what is also interesting is, in 2010, SMMEs contributed only 18% to the GDP. In 2020, 10 years down the line, they are contributing approximately 40%. And what is interesting, in these 3 years, 2019, 2021, these were COVID years. That even during the COVID years, 2020 and 2021, it was still approximately 40% contribution to the GDP, which is still massive. This data shows that if you look at this, there's definitely nothing small about the small, medium, micro enterprises. And if I look at the main challenges, you know the main challenges. You are the practitioners in the space. You know the main challenges of SMEs. And I looked at from my experience and then from research in terms of what are the major challenges that SMMEs are faced with. There are several of them, but I picked, I think, only 3. The first one is access to finance and capital. This is huge because finance and capital enables them to be able to buy the raw materials or the products that they will sell. And most of them, because they have not been participating in the economy, they don't have a credit record. They cannot even go and borrow in their name, in their personal capacity. You are working. Those of you here who are having side businesses, you can go you visit a bank and you take a personal loan in your personal capacity, you can have access to it. Maybe you can even take a second bond on your house, have access to it, you can start a business. But most of the people in the small, medium, micro enterprises don't have that luxury. They are dependent on the state, they are dependent on the cities to be able to provide that net. Because the commercial banks entities are not going to look at them. They don't qualify. They have no collateral that they can provide. So this is huge. And I know there is the preferential procurement. I think I've mentioned it here. The preferential procurement where you want them to participate, but most of them, they actually struggle. And they end up going for very expensive finance that eats up into their profit, that kills their sustainability. There are some that will just roll out one project, but post that project, they cannot survive. They are deep in debt. They have paid maybe what they had to learn to run the project, and now they're struggling. So it's an issue. It's an issue. And cities, I'm not sure how you're going to do it, but you need to unlock this. Tshimologong is part of the 12 digital innovation hubs in Africa, tied to the digital innovation hubs in Europe. Europe, they've got the EU, and we are on a peer learning model. What I can tell you is in Europe, especially the smaller economies of Europe, excluding your Germany, biggest, number one being Germany, number two being France, I think England, and number three dropping fast. And I hope we don't do that, because we're number one, we're still number one. I hope we don't drop fast, because if you look at England, it's dropping very fast in the economy. The smaller economies like your Finland, your Switzerland, they have managed to unlock this vehicle. Access to finance and capital for the SMMEs. And now the SMMEs are actually thriving and providing services to a number of EU countries. And that's why I say this is one of the challenges that we need to unlock. I know, because I've worked in the city, that you've got the challenge of your MFMA, PFMA that you need to follow. But there is also something that you need to unlock within the Preferential Procurement Policy Act. And then there is the challenge of operating space. Operating space is very important to SMMEs. If the cities don't provide or don't enable that, number one, a number of the people who are running the SMMEs, they don't even have much space for their own personal life, for their own accommodation. So now, I always say this. If you look at some of the startups that were started globally, you talk about Steve Jobs, they'll tell you that they started their startup where? In a garage, right? You can talk about even like your Facebook. Where was it started? They talk about started by students in the garage. Reality is, our people don't have garages. Unless I'm lying. That's reality. So you cannot expect, as a city, you cannot look at these people that you are supposed to stimulate and think that when they go home, they've got enough space to run an SME. They don't. Even in the state-provided houses, what are they? It's a 2-bedroom. It's a 4-room, right? It's a 4-room. An average family of 3 children or 4 children. Mother, father, and cousins, especially, our families. How big they are. There's not enough space for them to even run their businesses at home. So they are looking at the cities. So that's one of the challenges that the cities need to unlock. Provision of operating space. And by operating space, I'm looking at facilities for trading. And the facilities need to be clean. Remember, if they are not clean, it may lead to the owner being sick. And when the owner is sick, now what happens? They miss work. When they miss work, it's not like you and me. When we miss work, we still get our full salary at the end of the month, right? With them, they don't. The loss of income, direct loss of income. I'm talking about operating space. Right now, where we are, there can be load shedding. We continue like nothing is happening. The only thing is that we complain when we go home because there'll be traffic. But at work, we're operating like nothing was happening. Am I lying? Big businesses have been able to create space to operate within load shedding. But SMMEs, when there's load shedding, they shut down, a number of them. So, this is one of the challenges that needs to be unlocked. Compliance. I'm not going to talk much on this. There is a study by the World Bank, the ease of doing business. Actually, when I was a student of Job Bank, it became a KPI. I'm not sure if it's still a KPI now. It was one of the KPIs. I was in economic development. It was a KPI for economic development, which was a metric measure. How is the city performing on the ease of doing business? Are you making it much more difficult to do business? Are you making it much more harder for SMMEs to actually trade? This includes the ease of doing business. What are the barriers that the city is creating for the SMMEs? Are there any barriers? I know there is competing interest. I'm not oblivious to the fact that there's competing interest, because some of the big businesses, they will come to the city and say, we are paying rates and taxes, and you know that whole discussion. We're paying rates and taxes, and then there are people who are doing this, and some of them are competing with us. That's why you are running the cities, for you to be able to unlock this challenge. I mentioned it as the main challenge. And then the next one is access to market. Access to market is a big challenge to SMEs. And the city needs to think of ways of unlocking the challenge. I'm in the digital innovation space. I can tell you that some of these young innovators that are coming up with amazing products, they find it very difficult to actually deal with the cities because of the compliance issues, because of other issues. They find it very difficult. We need to actually ask ourselves, how do we provide? How do we become a marketplace for the SMMEs? I plotted this funnel here just to show you the development of the SMEs. And like you can think of it like as a funnel. So there will be different filters along the way, like in a funnel. So some will still be like at idea, at concept development. They'll come with concepts. They'll come with ideas to the city, asking for help, asking for support. That may lead now to, through your interventions, if you do have them, to say the ideas and concepts need to be validated. They need to be proven. And beyond the proven, then they need, in the entrepreneurship development, talk about it as a minimum viable product. Something that has minimum functionality that you can take to the market to taste. And then when you have done that, and the creation of an MVP, this becomes an expensive exercise. Not that expensive, but it's a costly exercise. And the big question is, who funds this development in the first two filters? Remember I said, the owners of the SMMEs, most of them don't have an income. These are some of them, there are some that have resigned and cashed their pension and all that stuff. They have access to the capital. But a number don't have. So what are the cities doing to unlock these two? And then beyond that now, when they start being a startup, talk about now how do you validate the market? Now they take the product to the market will validate, we like this product or we don't like this product, or maybe go improve this, etc. Creation of a business case. And then once they start doing that, now they generate revenue, they start trading, and then they are primed for business growth and sustainability. When they get to the last filter, it's easy to raise funds at that stage, because now this is where even your private entities like your venture capitalists come on board. And even your commercial banks are able to come on board at that end. Why am I mentioning this? Why am I putting this? Because the city needs to consider, be one of the first filters, because no one is willing to take that risk at this stage, because there's still risks associated with SMMEs. What next for the SMMEs? I'm plotting you there as the cities. You need to have a dynamic SMME development strategy that considers the needs of the SMMEs. And this needs to be developed in consultation with them, with the people who are on the ground, who understands their challenges. The next one, what programs are you running as a city to support the SMMEs? Remember, if you talk about your own municipality or your own city, you've got a contribution to the GDP. And in that contribution, the SMMEs contribute almost half of that. So you need to consider them. Have support programs. Funding, mentioned about funding. Consider the funding. Preferential procurement. How do you unlock within the legislative environment that has been created? How do you create an environment that supports SME development? And what that does, then it will open up economic participation and activities from the SMMEs. So what I've just done here, what I've just shared with you in a summary, are the statistics, basically, to stimulate your thinking. You've seen the numbers. There's really nothing small about it. If you want to talk about the economic development, economic growth of a city, we're talking the SMEs are going to contribute that. You can look at the peers. When I talk about the peers, I'm talking about even the other developing countries, smaller EU countries, and you look at how they have driven their economy, and it has been through SMMEs. Because big businesses are struggling. On a lighter note, even if you look at our own boy, Elon Musk, when he's moving to Twitter, what did he say? He's going to retrench how many percent? 70% of them. Big businesses don't have mercy for jobs. SMEs, it's the only, not the only route, it's a route for economic development. Let me open up for a discussion in the last 8 minutes. Questions? Okay, I've sent you. Do we have a roving mic?
Thank you very much for that stimulating masterclass, I guess. My name is Marhawi. I'm an associate with the South African Cities Network. I'm sure you're the right person, given that you said you've worked with the city of Johannesburg, and also now you're working with the university and you're involved in that space. When it comes to supporting SMMEs within the South African context, most of the conversation seems to be at the national level, through the various departments that you've mentioned. And I don't know if my background is more in the planning, housing, that space, but I always worry about the capacity of cities or municipalities to be able to drive their economies by supporting SMMEs in the way you've described. So, I mean, what's your sense in terms of the capacity of the municipalities or the particular departments within municipalities for implementing these kind of ideas you've mentioned? And I think, do you have some examples of some cities that are doing certain things right? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I'll give a practical example. One thing that I think the city needs to do is to create an ecosystem of SMEs, an ecosystem that will consist of all the players, including the national, but at implementation level, most of the cities, I'm trying to think here, maybe with the exception of Msunduzi, all the cities have a resident university. Am I right? Is there any city that doesn't have a resident university in your city? I know Eguruleni is coming. Remember, it's coming. Yeah, it has been passed. It's coming. So let me tell you why I want to raise that. One of the programs that we've been doing with the city of Johannesburg through VETS is the innovation challenges, where the city comes up and say, these are the problems that we're faced with as a municipality. And we help them define the problem further, put it out there to the young people. They've got ideas. They will come with ideas. If I go back to my channel, they come with ideas and concepts that are not clean, that are not developed, but they need to be further developed. I can give one practical example. There is a young man who has created a smart manhole cover. He was actually one of the winners for the Innovation Challenge for the city of Johannesburg. So what the smart manhole cover does, I think you have the same challenge where people are stealing the manhole covers, right? They leave it open. I don't want to talk about the incident that happened in Soweto where a child fell down the drain. So what that smart manhole cover does, it was an innovation from a young man. He came up with it. It's smart. We are living in the Internet of Things. So what that smart manhole cover does is, number one, it prevents tampering. The moment you tamper, it's real-time reporting. It has also an added benefit for blockages, for example. And it will not wait for whatever, if it's a sewage pipe, for it to overflow. It will measure the depth of the liquid. When there is all of a sudden an increase, it must be understandable. Maybe if there is soccer around Soccer City, so we expect the sewage around there to increase at that point. So, but if all of a sudden there is an increase, then you start monitoring, you zoom into it, and you attend to the problem before you've got these spillages. And that's the use of technology. And it was one of the initiatives from the Innovation Challenge. I'm mentioning this because the cities can actually do that. Partner with other ecosystem players. Involve young people to come up with practical solutions to everyday problems. I've just given you a long practical answer. There was another hand behind you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Rose Nkasi. I'm based in Welkom in the Free State. I'm a town and regional planner that has worked a lot in the small and medium enterprise space. I expected, I think if VETS is going to talk, VETS is my university, if VETS is going to talk about small business, I expected more. I'll tell you why. Having been involved in the space, I've realized that there's a lot of support for small businesses. I'll give an example. I used to do traditional clothing, and the Department of Trade and Industry gave me such a massive support that I got to a place where I said, I don't need to showcase my products anymore. I can see where they're going, and I think it's not a sustainable route. I'll try something else. Then I went into food. Got support, again, into food. So there are challenges. within the small business space, most of which I feel haven't really been covered, especially when we're talking about the cities relating to growth of small businesses. As a town planner, now that I've been exposed to small businesses, when I sit in the municipal planning tribunal and give an input and look at an application of someone who's looking at developing a small business on a residential property, I looked at it differently now that I know what is involved in it. And that is, I think, where we're supposed to be talking as to how do we enhance the space and make sure that it's a developmental route and not having legislations challenging the growth of small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Okay, how many more hands? I have 1.5 minutes left. Okay, the last hand. No, she has the mic already. Thank you.
I don't know if it's on. Okay. Thank you for that. That was really awesome. I just had, I think, 2 comments. Oh, my name is Siwe. I work for C40 Cities, also SACN alumni. I just wanted to bring up 2 points. The first one was, I think, on the future of work. I think if you want to rethink about small businesses and what they should be doing beyond economic development and solving problems, we should think about the future of work altogether, because that's going to influence the kinds of businesses that we develop. The reason why I'm saying this is because we obviously have high unemployment, especially amongst graduates. And at this point, I'm actually thinking about a guy named Moses Mangaliso, who's a cost accounting graduate. A very smart guy, but he was unable to find a job. And then he started a recycling business, collecting waste and selling that. And now he's able to kind of generate an income up to 1,000 Rand a day, which is something some of us who work a 9 to 5 can't make in a day. 1,000 Rand in a day from collecting waste. So I think there's also work to be done in that sense to change who should be doing those kinds of jobs, because we have a perception that onyaope or drug users are the ones who are responsible for managing our recyclables, when there are graduates who also want to develop viable businesses solving social, environmental, and economic issues through recycling. So I think the future of work is something that we really need to rethink and restructure, and especially something as Tshimologong Precinct should be also encouraging those kinds of innovations and supports, which is something I also was thinking about. You mentioned some of the great ideas and innovations that young people are coming up with and winning prizes and support for different innovations, which is really great. But there are second, third, fourth, fifth, and hundreds of ideas that are submitted into those kinds of platforms which don't get to be developed because they are not at startup stage or support stage, or there's not enough funding to do that. But I think there's opportunity for those proposals, fundings, ideas to be used by our cities as ideas and rethink and connect with those. I personally even submitted an energy solution innovation to the DBSA a few years ago. I still haven't received any feedback about that, but I really think it was a great idea. I just didn't have any funding to continue pursuing that. So I think even in the sense of like bursaries, you only reward the best, top few, but there are also very average people who can be upskilled to become great and have great ideas that can actually contribute to the system. So I think there's also work to be done in that sense. I just had a question for you, especially because you mentioned something about how small businesses are increasing competition and productivity within the space. And I think about the independent power producer program that our cities are working. I think Cape Town is the most advanced in that sense now. And I think there's also work to be done there, because I think we're at the risk that these independent power producers will be the same big national companies that will continue acting in the same, non-developmental, non-transformative way as other companies have been acting. So I just wanted to know how you think we can bring SMMEs, even the micro enterprises, the small innovators who are doing work at a small scale that's having big impacts, because I also think we need to detach ourselves from the bigger, wider picture and look at small interventions, because those are the ones that we can measure and people can actually participate in. So I want to know how we can, maybe the city, maybe this is a question for the room, but how do you think we can incorporate SMMEs, especially its micro enterprises, social enterprises, innovators into the city's independent power producer program, so that we have community-oriented energy solutions that don't rely on the bigger grid system, but are also providing impact and good quality jobs at a local level? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm worried about time. But thank you for that question. I think it has been heard by everyone here. Question for another day for discussion. But my parting shots tied to your question, I will say, I mentioned the issue of collaboration. I run an innovation hub. It's a digital innovation precinct. We talk innovations there. The way I see things is two ways. There is the today, right now. There are SMEs, they are non-digital, that need support from the cities for their sustainable livelihood today. And then we also need to think of the industries of the future of work. I mentioned the manual cover, which is the innovation that we pursued. And we had limited time. I mentioned the issue of partnering with the universities so that the innovators also are able to have access to some of the skills that are in the universities, some of the research that is in the universities that is ready for commercialization. Because not all universities commercialize all the research. Actually, most of the research, 90% of it is actually, I'm very conservative, I should maybe say 99% of it is not commercialized. And that research will actually even deal with that problem, because we talk about deep, serious research of products that can be commercialized. If you look at your great startups, I will mention them. Your Facebook, where was it started? By university students. Yes. Popular narrative say they dropped out of university. They were not university, they dropped out because of the business at that time was growing. And that's what you need to tell your kids. No, they made it to university. Work hard, get there, have the skills. Because to participate in the digital economy, you need to have the skills. Bill Gates was not a dropout because he failed. He dropped out because at that time Microsoft was growing at a much greater pace. So partner with innovation hubs, partner with cities. Come up, I'm a very big fan of innovation challenges. You'll be amazed at the innovations that will come up from the young people within your community. And then if you need additional skills, you tap into your innovation hubs. You tap into your universities. You've got the skills that will support you. Thank you so much. You have been a great audience.